Hello, and welcome to Channel 45 News. I'm Adam Smith, and we have a breaking story to cover for you today. I'm standing outside the White House where Lyndon Baines Johnson has just signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968 into law. This act includes the Fair Housing Act and Title VIII, a main focus of the civil rights activists. Now to Lauren Wiseman, who has more information about how this act came to be. Lauren?
Hello. I'm here to talk about the background information of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, retail, or financing of houses based on race, religion, or natural origin. The bill went through multiple debates before being passed by the Senate days after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. Some of these debates included Shelley versus Kramer in 1948 and Jones versus Meyer Company in 1968. Despite the Supreme Court's decision which outlawed the exclusion of African Americans or other minorities, many race-based housing patterns still occurred even throughout the late 1960s. Some people tried to challenge these patterns, but many of those who did dealt with threats, violence, and other harsh acts. This also caused trouble for African Americans and Hispanic families in search for homes after losing family members from the Vietnam War. This mistreatment and discrimination called for organizations such as the NAACP to demand for a new fair housing legislation to be passed. On April 11, 1968, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, also known as the Fair Housing Act. Due to this, the African American population in American urban areas is set to increase. Although this seems great for African Americans, many people are upset and plan to move to the suburbs. They also plan to take job opportunities. This may lead to inner-city communities with high minority populations that may be filled with unemployment, crime, and many other problems. Back to you, Smith.
Thank you, Lauren. That has really opened my eyes. And now we go to Abigail McCurdy, who has more information on what the Civil Rights Act of 1968 is really about. Abigail?
Thank you. With the Brown v. Board decision in 1954 declaring segregation in schools unconstitutional, and with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, segregation in the workforce and in public places was outlawed. And now, 4 years later, on April 11th, we have another continuation with the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Passed by Congress and signed by our President Lyndon B. Johnson, the Act protects all people of any race, color, or origin to equal housing opportunities. The Act bars discrimination against potential and current buyers and renters, and prohibits the preference based on race and the coercion, threatening, intimidation, or interference with any person's enjoyment of the housing right in America. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. McCurdy. Hopefully this has informed the public and opened their eyes to how this will help society in America. And now, for Saul Marcelino, who has been present at the signing. Mr. Marcelino?
Yes, I was present today at the signing, and my colleagues have informed me of what happened in Congress. It all started with the Kernel Commission report of 1967, which recommended a, quote, comprehensive and enforceable federal open housing law, end quote. This revived the bill. In the Senate, debate started with Edward Brooke, the first African American to be elected into the Senate. Senator Brooke spoke about his personal struggles of finding housing after his service in World War II. On April 4, 1968, the bill passed with slim margins with the support of Senate Republican leader Everett Dirksen, defeating a Southern filibuster. The final breakthrough was the assassination of MLK Jr. on April 5th. OBJ wrote a letter to the House of Representatives urging them to pass the Fair Housing Act. Legislative Director Joseph Califano and the Speaker of the House, John McCormick, worked together and passed the bill on April 10th, and was signed into law by LBJ the very next day, April 11th today. Now back to you, Smith.
Thank you, Saul, for your insight. I've just gotten word that we've received footage from inside the press room, courtesy of Mr. Marcelino and Gillette Profusion Razors.
On an April afternoon in the year 1966, I asked a distinguished group of citizens that were interested in human rights to meet me in the cabinet room in the White House. In their presence that afternoon, I signed a message to the Congress. That message called for the enactment, and I quote, of the first effective federal law against discrimination in the sale and the rental of housing in the United States of America. Few in the nation, and the record will show that very few in that room that afternoon, believed that fair housing would in our time become the unchallenged law of this land. And now, at long last, this afternoon, its day has come. Now with this bill, the voice of justice speaks again. It proclaims that fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life.
Today has been a monumental day in history, and as LBJ says, peace is a journey of 1,000 miles, and it must be taken one step at a time. And today, folks, I think we're one step closer. Thank you for watching Channel 45 News. Good night.
Ever notice what happens to Nixon when the political winds blow? Last year, he said, I oppose a federal open housing law. This year, he said, I support the 1968 Civil Rights Bill with open housing. Again this year, he said, I just supported it to get it out of sight. Which way will he blow next? On November 5th, vote